Why does the U.S. need three-carrier triad in the Middle East? For the first time since the shock and awe campaign of 2003, the United States has transferred an unprecedented concentration of naval supremacy in this region. But where are the positions of each carrier in the Middle East? The U.S. Abraham Lincoln and USS Gerald R. Ford are currently stationed in the northern Arabian Sea and Red Sea, respectively. The USS George H.W. Bush recently arrived in the Indian Ocean, completing the unprecedented three-carrier deployment within the U.S. Central Command area of responsibility. But in Part 1, why did they have to take such a long detour? The deployment of the Nimitz-class USS George H.W. Bush was a calculated logistical maneuver. Departing Naval Station Norfolk on March 31, 2026, the carrier strike group did not take the traditional shorter route through the Mediterranean and the Suez Canal. Instead, the massive 100,000-ton vessel executed a 10,000-kilometer detour around the Cape of Good Hope, sailing up the eastern coast of Africa. The tactical logic. This route was deliberately chosen to bypass the Bab al-Mandeb Strait, with the waters heavily contested by Houthis' anti-ship ballistic missiles and drone swarms. Routing a high-value asset like a supercarrier through a narrow choke point presents an unnecessary operational risk. By taking the long way around, the Bush arrived in the U.S. Central Command CENTCOM area of responsibility in the Indian Ocean with its strike group completely untouched and maintaining the element of operational surprise, ready to reinforce the ongoing maritime blockade. This is Part 2 to strategic positioning. As of late April 2026, the U.S. Navy has effectively surrounded the Arabian Peninsula, establishing three distinct vectors of attack and defense. U.S. Abraham Lincoln, the Vanguard, Arabian Sea. Positioned closest to the Iranian mainland in the Arabian Sea, the Lincoln is the spearhead. From this location, its air wing has immediate, unhindered access to the Strait of Hormuz and the southern coast of Iran, enforcing the blockade and conducting non-stop combat operations. This is the U.S. Gerald R. Ford, the western flank, Red Sea. The Navy's newest and most advanced supercarrier has been deployed for over 10 months. Operating in the Red Sea, the Ford secures the western approaches. While further from Iran, its escorts provide a massive umbrella of air and missile defense against proxy threats, and its aircraft can easily refuel mid-air to conduct deep penetration strikes across the region. Here is the USS George H.W. Bush, which acts as the southern axis for this operation. Currently moving up from the Indian Ocean, the Bush serves as the fresh reserve and the southern hammer. It brings a completely restocked magazine and a rested air wing, providing crucial relief and overwhelming reinforcement to the naval forces that have been stretched thin, enforcing the airtight blockade. But how exactly do U.S. attack operations and logistical support actually work? Part 1. The naval pivot. The chess pieces are moving. We are tracking the largest naval redistribution since the 2003 invasion of Iraq. The Pentagon is emptying the Pacific to flood the Persian Gulf. But where are all the U.S. nuclear carriers stationed when not at war? And how many will travel to Iran and the Middle East? On paper, the number is 11 nuclear-powered supercarriers, divided into two distinct classes. First, the Nimitz class. These are the 10 workhorses of the fleet, commissioned between 1975 and 2009. Second, the Ford class. Right now, there is only one, the USS Gerald R. Ford. This new generation uses electromagnetic catapults to launch jets faster. Well, let's look at this scenario: what happened when the Department of War gives a green signal. The USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group is typically stationed in the South China Sea to deter Chinese vessels. However, upon receiving flash priority orders, it can sprint to the Middle East in just a week. It has to transit the Malacca Strait, the choke point between Malaysia and Indonesia. This leaves the Pacific dangerously thin, with only the USS Ronald Reagan or its replacement, the George Washington, potentially available in Japan. The plan is to have three carrier strike groups operating in the Middle East within 10 days to form a pincer deterrent. Why do you really need a second and third aircraft carrier in the Middle East? Well, this isn't a rotation. This is a convergence. When these three carriers converge, they will form a triad strike force capable of ending a war or starting one. Getting the new Gerald Ford to the fight is a logistical marathon. Currently operating in the Atlantic Theater, the carrier, along with the relentless destroyers of Strike Group 12, must execute a high-speed transit. They will pierce the Strait of Gibraltar, navigate the narrow choke point of the Suez Canal, and descend through the Red Sea. It's a 3-week race against time. But why? Why rush a second carrier to a region already patrolling with a Nimitz-class supercarrier? In modern naval warfare, the most dangerous enemy isn't a missile. It is exhaustion. A single carrier crew cannot fight forever. Humans need sleep, machines need repair. To solve this, the Lincoln and the Ford will not take turns launching one plane at a time. Instead, they will trade entire shifts. This is the doctrine of the battle rhythm. But why do you need this battle rhythm strategy for a carrier strike group? Imagine a floating city with nuclear fuel and 5,000 people. Without a system, it's chaos. Simply put, battle rhythm is the daily heartbeat of the ship. It synchronizes the admiral's decisions with the sailor's sweat. There are 2 pulses. First, the operational pulse. This is the air plan. For 12 to 15 hours, the ship runs continuous cycle operations, launching and catching jets every 60 to 90 minutes. It is a deafening, non-stop assembly line of violence. Second, the command pulse. While jets fly, commanders cycle through a fixed schedule of intel briefs, targeting boards, and night orders. Battle rhythm turns 24 hours of chaos into a sustainable routine of war. If you lose the rhythm, you lose the fight. Still confused? Let me simplify this further for 2 carriers working together. From midnight to noon, the U.S. Abraham Lincoln owns the darkness. This is the night shift. The Lincoln, a veteran of the Nimitz class, relies on her experienced air wing and battle-tested steam catapults to hammer targets under the cover of night. For 12 hours, she launches wave after wave, but as the sun climbs high, her shift ends. By noon, the Lincoln recovers her last jet and goes quiet, entering reset mode for maintenance and crew rest. But the enemy gets no reprieve. Because as the Lincoln winds down, the USS Gerald R. Ford ramps up. From noon to midnight, the Ford takes the day shift. Using her electromagnetic launch system, she generates a higher tempo of sorties, launching raids when visual identification is easiest. She is faster, more efficient, and relentless. The result is a suffocating embrace. The Lincoln haunts the night. The Ford dominates the day. Between them, they ensure that for the adversary there is no safe hour. There is only the noise of the next launch. But with 2 carriers, the Navy unlocks the continuous strike doctrine. As stated, the Lincoln owns the night, the Ford owns the day. By staggering their schedules, the United States can keep strike fighters in the air 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There is no reset. There is no pause. For the adversary, the skies are never safe. Then there is the raw volume of fire. This is the Alpha Strike. A single carrier brings about 50 strike aircraft. 2 carriers? That brings nearly 100 dedicated fighters to the theater. The radar programming and software on the Gerald R. Ford-class aircraft carrier allow it to process massive amounts of information instantly. For example, when small killer drones are detected flying toward the flight deck, the system can quickly identify the most important threats, coordinate multiple weapon systems, and engage them by firing the close-in weapon system phalanx guns. This automated process requires much less manual control compared to older aircraft carriers, making the Ford class much more effective at neutralizing fast, small threats. That's the Kinetic defense system. But what about cyber warfare? Well, we have this military-grade app that fights to keep you stealthy under the radar. Even if you are bombarded with all kinds of spam emails, jump calls, and all kinds of online breaches with our financial data. This data doesn't just result in spam and scam attempts. It can also affect your insurance rates and ultimately will lead into a loan denial just when you might need credit. Incogni helps protect your privacy by regularly scanning and preventing data brokers from re-uploading your information. You'll also get a clear, real-time dashboard to track the status of your data. As an add-on with Incogni Unlimited plans, you can gain access to this custom removal tool. So take your personal data back with Incogni. Use code AITELLY with the link below incogni.com/AITELLY and get 60% off on an annual plan. If diplomacy fails, these 2 ships can generate a pulse of power sufficient to overwhelm advanced air defense networks simultaneously. It is saturation warfare for the enemy. 2 jets targeting the Iranian, coming from 2 vectors all at once. And let's not forget the hardware itself, of the biggest aircraft carrier ever sailed. How big? Well, for comparison, the Nimitz-class aircraft carrier looks almost the same, but the Ford's deck size is much larger. Let's break it down further. The Ford has around 25 decks or layers spanning from the bottom of the hull to the top of the superstructure, while the Nimitz class has about 18 decks. These decks or layers span vertically through the ship's hull and superstructure, showing a significant difference in size and capacity. This size difference gives the Ford class an advantage. It typically carries up to 90 aircraft, while the Nimitz class generally accommodates around 60, though maximum configurations for both can exceed these numbers. That's roughly a 30 aircraft advantage. All of this is largely due to the Ford's larger, more open hangar bay and wider flight deck. To give you a better idea of how the Ford accommodates such a large number of aircraft, most are stored in the hangar bay, which is directly below the flight deck, the top level used for takeoffs and landings. The hangar stretches across roughly 2/3 of the ship's length and provides space for storing, maintaining, and preparing aircraft when they're not on the flight deck. The flight deck itself covers about 4.5 to 5 acres, roughly equivalent to 3.5 to 4 American football fields in length and up to 1 football field in width. This immense area allows the carrier to accommodate and operate up to 90 jets and helicopters at maximum capacity. We make original videos from scratch and animated by humans, so please subscribe to not miss a beat.